Well, welcome to the first episode of this new series. I'm Michael Conklin. I'm an endowed professor of business law. And in this series, we're going to use clips from Pawn Stars and some of my statistical research on the show to illustrate different negotiation principles, both what you should do and probably more likely what you shouldn't be doing. So we'll get into the really advanced stuff as the video series goes on, but let's start off with a really basic principle. So while there's always exceptions, the general principle is that in any type of negotiation, you want to be first, okay? Whether you're the buyer or the seller, whether you are negotiating about a multi-million-dollar house or a t-shirt, or whether you're negotiating about something that's not monetary at all, such as how many days your in-laws are going to stay at your house. In all of those instances, you want to make the first offer in whatever form an offer comes in, given the subject matter. You want to be first. And it's implied that when you're first, you want to be kind of extreme. So in a traditional negotiation like you would see on Pawn Stars, the seller, if they're first, they would want to be really high. They would want to give a really high price. And the buyer, if they get to be first, they're going to want to be really low. It's not going to really benefit you anything to be first if you give an extremely reasonable, middle-of-the-road offer. Now, the reason this is something called cognitive anchoring. We'll get into this in a lot more in-depth in a future episode, but for now, just know that anchoring, a lot like a boat anchor, kind of keeps a boat tied and anchored to a certain location. Anchors in negotiations keep people tied and anchored down to certain numbers. So let's say you've got an item worth about $20,000 you're looking to sell. You've watched this video, so you know you want to be first and you want to be high. So you come out with a number, let's say $28,000. That's really high. Now, the negotiation becomes anchored to $28,000. So the buyer is now thinking, how much lower than $28,000 can I go? Okay, now if you would have let the buyer go first, he probably would have come up with a low number, maybe like $11,000, and then the negotiation would have been tied to $11,000 and how much higher you as the seller could get him to go up from $11,000. So you can see why you want it tied to 28 to start off with and not tied to 11. This is almost a universal principle in negotiations. Study after study after study in all settings, in legal settings, in high finance settings, in everyday negotiation settings, in everything, this principle works. This principle is so strong, the principle of anchoring, that even when you warn the research subjects in advance, now don't fall for anchoring just because somebody gives a first number that's really high or really low. Don't fall for that. Even if you warn people, studies show that it still makes a big difference. In essence, the higher you start off, the higher you're going to end up as at the end of the negotiation, because people become anchored to that point. Now, if you've watched the show Pawn Stars, you know they don't do this. 98 times out of 100, they'll have the item here and they'll ask the seller, well, how much do you want for it? Okay, this is horrible for two reasons. So first, you're letting the seller go first, which we've just been discussing why that's bad. And second, they say, what do you want for it? So they're probably going to come up with a high number because everybody wants to sell an item for a really high number. It'd be even better to ask, ideally you'd want to be first, but if you're not, it'd be better to ask something like, how much do you reasonably expect to get from this today? Instead of, how much do you want from this? That's basically like asking, like, what's the wildest, highest offer you can come up with? That's the worst thing you can do. Not only are you letting them go first, but now they're going to come up with a really, really high number. And even worse is oftentimes they will ask the other side, how much do you want for this? The other side gives their price. And then the Pawn Star guy mentions all the defects. Well, oh gosh, 20,000, no way, because look, that's messed up. That's not original. That's been re-glued, this and that. But they should have done that first because the anchor has already been set. So they should mention the defects first. And ideally then they should set the price. But if they're going to allow the other person to be first and set the price, they should at least mention the defects first, so that then the person knows, well, I guess I can't ask for 20,000 because there's all those defects. I guess I'll start off at a much lower number. So now let's look at some clips from the TV show that illustrate the problem with allowing the other side to go first.
Okay, how about 4,000?
How about 3,800?
I'm coming way down. I was at 6,800.
Okay. Now, how much do you want for this?
So I was looking to get $750.
Okay. I'll give you $40 for it.
Wow, that's a big drop.
You do it. That being said, man, I'll do $800.
800? That's a huge drop off. Come on, bro. You got to work with me.
All right, so notice what these people are saying. Oh, I'm coming way down from my initial offer. Oh, that's a big drop from my initial offer. Notice what they're not saying. They're not saying that it wasn't an unreasonable counteroffer. They're not saying, oh, I could sell this for way more than your counteroffer elsewhere. They're only saying the counteroffer was just so far away from the initial offer. This is anchoring. You're looking at the effects of anchoring. They set the anchor so high because they were allowed to go first. And now the counteroffer is not really being considered for the actual number that it is and whether the number is reasonable. It's just being considered as, oh, it's so far away from this initial number that I gave. That's anchoring. So from the standpoint of the buyer, the Pawn Star workers, from their standpoint, that's the danger of letting the other side go first from the seller's mindset, why it's bad to let the sellers go first. But it's also bad in what it does to your own mindset. Look at these clips.
Okay, so this is one of those weird situations that I hate being in. If it's worth $500, that means I could probably pay you $300, and it's really hard to offer somebody $300 when they asked for 50 grand. So,
Corey, I bought a train. I didn't think this guy was gonna actually sell this train for half and less of what he was asking.
So here we see letting the seller go first is not only harmful in that it anchors their mindset to such a high number, but it also anchors the buyer's mindset to a really high number, which is equally bad. So what happened here? Oh gosh, it's really hard for me. It's difficult for me to offer somebody $300 when they came in asking for $50,000. It's not that $300 wasn't reasonable. He's just saying $300 is so far away from $50,000 that it hurts him to do that. And in the second one, I think he specifically said half and less than what he was asking. I think that's Chumley speak for less than half what he was asking, if you kind of interpret that. But what does that matter? That's totally irrelevant. The asking price is just some artificial number. It doesn't matter if you get 90% off the asking price, 50%, or only 2%. It just matters what you actually pay. But in the real world, people don't think purely logical like that. So even these people who are professional negotiators, you're seeing how the effects of cognitive anchoring are affecting them. So remember, in your negotiations, no matter what the subject matter is, no matter which side you're on, you want to be first. You want to set that anchor to a number that's advantageous to your side. Don't let the other side go first and set the anchor to something that's advantageous to them. In the next video, we'll talk about the next step, which is not just be first, but be specific. So you'll see a link to that next video in the description. And also you should see links to future videos in this series down there. And finally, if you have any comments or questions or disagreements about anything that I've said in this video, put it in the comments below. I'll be checking those and responding. So I'll see you in the next video.